Hello and welcome to our third Tuesday at 3 series event, Google Gemini Quick Start. This is our monthly series here for October 2024. I'm Allen Falcon, CEO and co-founder of Cumulus Global. I want to thank you for joining us here today, taking time to either join us here on the live stream or watching this on demand, and we hope the information today is helpful to you. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and so I'm going to jump right in. Just a reminder that the audio is muted, so if you have any questions at any time, please use the icon on the top or right-hand side of your screen and open that questions window. It just lets me track things to make sure we've got them all addressed, and if it's something that's specific to your organization, we can follow up one-on-one after the session at your convenience. This session is being recorded and will be posted generally within 24 hours. As always, we'll send you an email with the link. Feel free to share with others who might find this valuable. And our 3-Tier-3 series is one of many resources we have on our resource center. In addition to our blog and our monthly newsletter, we're now publishing sort of a what's new, what's important weekly bulletins for both Microsoft Cloud, focusing on Microsoft 365, and Google Workspace. That one is each Wednesday. You can subscribe to those, get those delivered to your inbox. We're adding generally one ebook or white paper to our resource library a month, so keep an eye out for titles that might be new to you. And new on our YouTube channel, we've got a series of short videos, typically less than 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, called Cloud Bursts, where we're covering timely issues as they come up, and we feel it'd be valuable to get them shared with you. So with that sort of welcome out of the way, let's dive right into it. Today we're going to sort of talk about what Gemini is, what an overview and the options that are available to you, a little bit about licensing and pricing as well. We'll dive in and quickly walk through 11 things, actually more than 11 things Gemini can do for you in your business, and talk about 3 specific limitations you need to be aware of if you're going to start using Gemini or really any generative AI service. And so diving right in, Gemini app and Google One subscription is the way to get it. There's basically 2 different flavors of Gemini. There's the Gemini app, which is at gemini.google.com. There's a free version that gives you access to a more basic, learning model. Has a limited context window for back and forth conversations, and it can do some basic functions that is common across generative AI. There's an advanced version through that website that is effectively $20 per person per month. You access the Pro model for Gemini. It's a lot more enhanced. The context window is much longer. In fact, you can upload a 1,500-page document and do summaries and analysis off it. You'll get new features sooner. You can actually run Python code to script sequences of queries and adjusting the response. This version integrates with Google One. You'll need a Google One account to access it, and it comes with 2 terabytes of storage from Google One. And you can, in select languages, tap Gemini from Gmail, Docs, and Drive if you have a gmail.com address. The other way to access Gemini is through Google Workspace. If you have a Google Workspace subscription, the Gemini app at gemini.google.com is now a core service of Workspace, meaning it's accessible with administrative granting of permissions to anyone in the domain. It is the Gemini Advanced product. And again, admins have some on-off capability to allocate who can access it, and whether or not Gemini can access content in your Google Workspace domain. So you can allow that or not, just allow that. There are then the Google for Workspace add-ons. This brings Gemini AI directly into the screens and the functions of Gmail, Drive, Docs, Sheets, Slides, and Meet. Other apps are coming soon. And it's priced based on the licensing you have for Google Workspace or Google Workspace for Education. And there are generally 2 tiers. If you're the business of the enterprise edition of Google Workspace or Education Premium, it's either $20 per user per month or $30 per user per month. Note that pricing is the monthly pricing with a minimum of 1 year commitment. If you want to do month to month, it's $24 or $36. There's a 20% surcharge from Google. out there. Now, we're going to offer at the end of the session, we'll talk a little bit about how you can test out Gemini for less than making that commitment. And we'll cover that as we wrap things up. So we look at Gemini for Google Workspace. Why are we seeing folks interested in it right now? Primarily, it's the ease of access. Depending on which screen you're in, you get a menu bar. You can see the little star symbol for generative AI. It's in the search bar area in your Gmail screen. It's in Drive, Docs, Sheets, and Slides. It's in the menu bar area. In the Meet, it's in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. And when you're in a Google Doc, when you're doing a word processing document, there's also a vertical bar with the 4 icons in it. Those 4 icons, the top one gives you access to Gemini's features specifically related to the document that you're working on at that particular point in time. And as always, if you hit the Google Workspace waffle in the upper right corner of the screen, you'll see that in the core services that come down, Gemini is now listed along with other services that you're familiar with. And so here are the 11 plus things that you can do with Google Gemini. Number 1 is summarize. And that is a great feature now. Within Google Workspace, you can now use Gemini to summarize documents or generate an outline of a document, list action items from a transcript or recording of a meeting. You can even do summaries of email conversations in your inbox, and you can pass it a URL and have it summarize the contents of a web page. Now, the Gemini app lets you summarize public content. Again, if you have Google for Workspace, you can summarize content within your domain. And so on the screen, and as I go through these screens, most of them you'll see an image of an actual query I did. So here, I'm not going to show you the content because it's confidential, but you can see this is actually part of my live inbox the other day. And I asked to summarize security-related messages from Google received in the last month. And it highlights the topics of those. You'll see at the bottom, it's actually telling me it pulled it from 6 sources. And then there's some other icons as well that you can give it the up or down arrow, which helps train the engine. You can copy that content and paste it somewhere else. You can explode it out and get more detail on a larger screen. And that magnifying glass with the AI star on it will actually take that query and enhance it by going out to the public internet. And again, that's sort of a feature from within Google Workspace. If you're using Gemini for Google Workspace, your initial queries won't include a public data search. It'll simply be searching the Gemini models and data sets, as well as your own content, if allowed. And you can ask it then to go out and get additional information from the public. Another thing that you can do, and this is a relatively new feature, is you can compare 2 or more things in the Gemini app or in Google Workspace. And even though I'm not a big fan of doing live demos, I'm going to do one here today. So now you can see I've brought up the Gemini app, geminigoogle.com/app. Actually, let me make this a little bigger for you, make it a little easier to see on your screen. I've put in a prompt to compare the Pixel 7, Samsung Galaxy S23, and iPhone 16. Hitting enter, it does its work, and you see when a comparison, for this comparison, it's actually giving me a nicely organized table. Comparison data can also be done in a narrative format. It's giving more detailed information. And again, here at the back of that response, I can say it was good, it was bad, I can modify it, I can share and export it, I can double check the response. This is a feature to help you validate the information that's being presented. And then there's some more features as well. Another way when you look at compare, this is actually looking at my Google Drive. This is the folder in which we build our presentations for this webcast series, as well as documents about it and the checklists we go through for setting it up and making sure we communicate about it. And here I'm asking it to compare. I've made changes to the checklist that we use to set up our webcasts. And so I'm actually asking it to compare the current checklist from back in March. And you can see Gemini works in the far right window. And it's actually looking in those Google spreadsheets, Google Sheets, and pulling up its results. Okay. And here you can see it starts to provide comparison there. And you can make that larger. And then you can always do a retry. It'll show more like this. It'll do a more in-depth analysis. So there's a lot of capabilities there when you look at, and this is really more of an example to show how it works from the Gemini app or from within. And that's sort of consistent for all of the things we talk about. You can ask Gemini to suggest products, services, activities, etc. For example, I asked it to suggest topics related to recent presentations on security in this folder. This was, again, done from within Google Workspace in our presentations folder. And it said, based on recent presentations, here's more information or more potential topics. It actually gave me a list of about 7. The first 3 and some basic descriptions are there as well. You can ask it to recommend sources for learning about information. And again, the app Gemini.com is going to use the model. If you're Google Workspace, you have the option of using public data and and integrating the results of a Google search. In Google Workspace, it's using the model, and with permissions, your internal data, you still have the option of going out to the public as well. You can ask Gemini for an explanation. This is number 4 on the list. And what's cool about asking for an explanation is you can suggest what type of explanation you want. Length, style, desired reading or education level, etc. And so here I started out saying, explain how to avoid IT blind spots based on ideas discussed in this presentation. I was inside one of our previous presentations it was a previous webcast presentation about IT blind spots, provide additional context from other sources. And so here it sort of took what was in my presentation, augmented with additional sources, and gave me a list of, a list of explanations if you were things to do. I then did retry with a Google search. So this goes out to the public internet now, does a Google search and collates results. And it came back and saying, when we suggested you implement core security measures. Looking at the web, these seem to be core security measures. And it went through all of the points in the first post and enhanced them with additional details in the second. So, explanation can be a really powerful research tool. 5 and 6, I'm sort of putting this together because you can draft and edit, and I put it together on one slide because the controls are the same. And the fact is, Gemini can draft text, create formulas, and do more. So, most people think about Google Docs, so I'll start elsewhere and loop back to that. In Google Slides, you can create prompts for Google Gemini to create slides, summarize presentations, and identify key takeaways, which is a great way to do summary slides or follow-up materials. In Google Sheets, Gemini can create a complex formula. It can adjust formatting, so you can highlight a section of the sheet and say, format this so it looks like A, B, C, and D, and you can summarize content and results of calculations. And so it can walk you through more complex embedded formulas and really save you time in Google Sheets. How you access it, again, you get prompts in different areas of the screen. In Google Docs, in addition to the upper right corner that I mentioned before, when you're actively working in a document, the area of the text will have that vertical image you see in the center of the screen with the 4 icons. From there, that top one brings out the Gemini features. And there you can actually highlight text and say, I want to change the tone, I want to summarize this, turn this paragraph into bullets, elaborate on the content, shorten the content, or rephrase it. And you can even do things, like they suggest in the prompt. You can make it a poem, you can make it rhyme, you can do other fun things with it. But again, you have that very interactive feel while you're working in the document. 7, the 7th way you can use Gemini is, and it's really a creative use of the chatbot, is you can either ask it to gather or create a list of ideas. So this example, I asked Gemini AI to brainstorm ideas for a new blog post on cybersecurity risks for small business. And it came back and gave me, 5 or 6, I think I'm showing the first 5 here on the screen of, potential titles and a brief description of what those blog posts might contain and what they might focus on. Again, this can be used in brainstorming meetings. It can be used individually. And particularly with the integration into Google Workspace, it makes it very easy to capture the content and save it into a Google Doc, into an email, etc. Looking at search, you can search. Now, Gemini can access the internet content and can execute conventional keyword searches. So the sample one I used here is what what the current, I actually mistyped it, what the current budget of the US government. It came back at the end of September, as of the end of September 30th, 2024, the last full month. It got the revenue, the spending, the deficit, etc., key points. And again, at the bottom, sources and related content. You can look at those. You can use tools to further validate this information before you use it. So now within Google Workspace, your administrator has to allow you to, for the Gemini app, to access your content. And that can be done when you're writing emails, in Docs, and in Drive. That access to your calendar, chat, and site content is coming soon. That's in the development cycle. And so here I'll step back and say, here's the difference between the Gemini app and Gemini for Google Workspace. Gemini for Google Workspace are the tools that are within each app within Google Workspace, and those have access to the relevant content that you're working with at that point in time, or the screen you're on, or the type of information you're dealing with. So when you do Gemini for Google Workspace and you're in your email inbox, the Gemini chat that comes in is going to be context sensitive to the fact that you're in email. And you can ask a question specific to that screen. It has access. The Gemini app, the separate tab in your browser or separate browser window that's gemini.google.com, even if you have Gemini for Google Workspace, won't be able to access your private content unless your administrator grants privileges. And so there is a little bit of setup and some decisions to make as we go through, and we can certainly help you with that as you explore Gemini and Gemini for Google Workspace. Ninth on the list is you can create image. Google currently uses Imagen 2 and Imagen 3 to generate images. Which one you get depends on whether you're in the Gemini app, in Gemini for Google Workspace, and your licensing level. And so obviously Imagen 3 are much higher resolution, much higher quality image. They are also watermarked to indicate that they were generated by AI, which helps you comply with certain disclosure requirements in certain situations. So here, when you look at the two images on your screen, the first was I just asked it to create a futuristic image illustrating cybersecurity for small businesses. You got a very realistic image of a circuit board with a lock on it, good symbolism there. I was specific not to include images of people. I then changed futuristic image to flat icon, which is a type of icon, a type of illustration. Usually generally 2 dimensions with a simple shadow added, and you can see the results there. And so again, you have that ability to take a response and enhance it, edit, even when you're creating images. For number 10, it's take meeting notes. When you go into Google Meet and you go to the upper right-hand corner, you've always been able to do transcripts, and even Gemini offers real-time translation into several languages. Now you can do take notes with Gemini. And what this does is, in addition or in place of a full transcript of the meeting or recording of the meeting, it actually pulls out main points. It can still provide that full transcript. It saves these main points and ideas on the owner, whoever organized the meetings, Google Drive. Note this is only available with Google Workspace Enterprise subscriptions. It requires that level of Google Meet. And as an example here, Bill, who's one of our senior cloud advisors, we do an account review once a week to check in, and you can see we started getting a summary of the meeting. So while a transcript will try and capture word for word and who's saying it, when it takes notes, Gemini will actually listen. It'll listen for a segment of the conversation, and when the nature of the conversation changes, it will summarize what it had just heard. And so it sort of spits it out in batches. We do have a question in the question window. I'll get to it towards the end of the presentation regarding security. Okay, items 11 and 12, I'm sharing a page here for a couple reasons. One, for most small businesses, you're not doing software development, so the fact that Gemini can create and help debug code in more than 20 programming language is nice to know, but probably not a prime use for Gemini at this point in time. The other thing that's happening now, if you subscribe to Gemini app, Gemini Advanced, or you have Gemini for Workspace, either at the business or enterprise level, is Google's introduced the concept of gems. And gems are custom AI agents for specific tasks. So effectively, a gem will allow you to build a sequence of queries in the Gemini app chat box and save those so you can run them over and over again. So you might say, for example, simple examples can be you wanted to look up the value of stocks and pull in any related news that might have affected the price. That's something you may want to do on a weekly or monthly basis. You can create a gem, and then once a week, once a month, you can go in and run those and get the updated results without having to memorize or save in a Word, in a document somewhere and cut and paste it back in. And so you can create effectively scripts and automation there. Okay. Security. What's not on here for limitation is security. I'm going to answer it because we did have a question about that. Gemini is secure. Now, and it really depends. The level of security depends on what you're paying for versus not paying for. If you're using the free Gemini app at gemini.google.com, then effectively every query you make, every response you get is going to feed back and help train the learning model. Effectively the rule of computer services is if you're not paying for the product, then effectively you are the product. So Google's going to learn what you search, how you rate it, how you modify it to support growing the model over time. When you pay for Gemini Advanced and when you're using Gemini for Workspace, it's private and secure. You have some control to prevent your queries and your information from training the model. In Gemini for Google Workspace, your queries and your data is never used to train the model or go externally. And so, Gemini for Google Workspace holds the same security requirements. It's a core service as Gmail and Docs and Drive, etc., and that your information is private. It's never released. Down the road, may users have permission to share outside the domain? Yes, that's not the case right now. And again, the question of how much information does Gemini keep? That's a great question as well. I'll jump down to that. Gemini does save your activity history. By default, it's forever. You can turn off history completely. You could also set to auto-delete history after 3, 18, or 36 months. So you can match it somewhat to company policies. You can not let it hold the history, or you can have it, forever by default. Now, again, if you're using Gemini for Google Workspace, either the business or enterprise decision, that active history is part of the learning that's specific only to your business and only accessible by people in your company. Outside of that saved history, Gemini actually has a relatively short memory. It's a limited context window. So if you have a long chat session going back and forth, Gemini will forget that it's shared certain content with you, and it can actually lose the context of the discussion. Now, Gemini for Google Workspace and Google Workspace come with Gemini Advanced. That is a 2 terabyte, 2 terabyte memory, as we talked about. The free version is much smaller. It's in the 32K range, I believe. The most important limitation of Gemini is Gemini can be wrong. Like any learning model and generative AI, you always want to verify results before you use them. Now, Gemini provides a couple of ways to do this. There's always a link to where you can look at the sources and validate with the sources. And then you also have the color G logo, which is to verify your results, where you can ask Google to check the sources or look for other sources and see if it can find contradictory or correcting information. Hard to believe that we're almost at the half hour at this point, and we've made it through. Hopefully this has been helpful to give you a sense of the broad range of ways that you can use Google Gemini. So what are your next steps? Your next steps, first and foremost, is we go through these 4 steps every time, right? Assess. How might Gemini help your team in your business? Now, we've covered really 10, we covered 12, but really 10 highly productive uses for Gemini and Gemini for Google Workspace. Which ones do you think your team would use? And for the value proposition, who should have access? Who will use it? Who will be able to take advantage of it? And this can be hard to determine. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to offer you the ability to try Gemini. Now, Google generally doesn't offer free trials of Gemini for small and mid-sized businesses. They'll do it for large enterprises on occasion who are looking at making commitment of hundreds or thousands of users a year. But for you, me, for other small, mid-sized companies, that's not the case. So we are offering, it is a paid trial, a highly discounted rate. You will not be paying anything close to, if you only want Gemini for 1 month, it's going to be $24 or $36 per month, for the month, depending on your Google Workspace license. We're providing it at a fraction of that, along with some online video lessons and tutorials to help you learn and use it. And over the course of your trial, we'll do a couple of check-in calls to hear how you're using it and suggest other use cases you might want to try. And so if you're interested in that, we'll provide information. You can use the contact information below. Additionally, we've got a number of resources in our library. You may recall that we have almost a workbook and a guide for creating great generative AI prompts, whether it's Gemini or any other generative AI service. We also have an introductory prompting guide specific to Gemini AI. And the content of this presentation in more detail, a little bit more detail, is also available as an ebook. So we've got multiple resources around Google Gemini and generative AI in the Resource Center. Feel free to click over there and sign up and download those. If you do the trial, if you have a sense of how Gemini might help you and your team and your business, that's great. If you have a sense of who would use it, who you want to have it, that's great. From that point, we can help you plan the timing and the training so that people aren't just walking into blind and it's not a toy. It actually gets used and thought about in terms of workflow and work process. And then we can help you not only deploy, but continue to educate your team so they get the most value out of it. On that note, I'll open the floor if anyone else has any additional questions. If not, and they come up later, feel free to contact us, info@cumulusglobal.com, or use the QR code and schedule an intro call with one of our cloud advisors. You can contact me directly. I know my phone number's on the screen. I'm bad about answering the phone and worse about returning voice messages, so please send me an email. I don't have an assistant who screens emails, so if I can't get back to you quickly, I may have a member of my team, but you will get a prompt response. And so on that note, I want to thank everyone for coming, either watching this in the live event or watching this on demand off our website is a webcast recording. I appreciate you taking time. I know I've covered a lot of ground today and talked a bit fast. There's a lot of information on the screen, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. At this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording for those who are watching the recording on demand, and I'll be back to answer any additional questions from the live attendees. Thank you so much.